Before we dive in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. Brooklyn after midnight. Rain tapping the tin awning of a corner bar, neon doing a slow pulse over wet pavement. In the back room, there's a man who never raises his voice. Paul Vario. Mid-50s, heavy shoulders, careful eyes. Gray suit worn soft at the elbows. He breaks ice with his molars, one piece at a time, and writes names in a small notebook nobody else touches. He doesn't chase crowds. He hates loud talk. He trusts doors that close and people who show up 5 minutes early. If a story runs longer than a minute, he stops listening. Keep it simple, he says, and the room gets quiet because simple is how you stay alive. His strengths are patience and memory. He remembers who paid late in '62 and who tried to hide behind a cousin. He knows the smell of fear, the sound of someone lying by the way the breath sits in their throat. His fear is chaos, hot heads, loose ends, the kind of attention that puts a stranger's face at the corner table. To the neighborhood he's a landlord, a helper, a man who finds your car when it goes missing. But tonight, a phone on the wall begins to ring, and the way Paul pauses before answering tells you this is the call that starts everything. The phone rang twice before he lifted it, slow like he already knew the voice waiting on the other side. It was Eddie, one of his airport boys, nervous, talking too fast about a truck that never made it out of JFK. "Customs froze it," he said. "They're sniffing around." Paul leaned back, chewing that ice till it cracked. "Sniffing around who?" he asked. The silence that followed told him enough. Someone had talked, or worse, someone had been careless. Airports were gold mines back then. Silk, liquor, jewelry, if it moved, Paul's people had their hands on it. But gold mines drew attention, and attention was poison. He'd built his power by avoiding headlines, not chasing them. Now, a few crates gone missing could undo a decade of quiet work. He told Eddie to stay put, hang up, and forget he called. Then he poured himself a shot of Sambuca, stared at the flame from the lighter, and thought about which man had the weakest stomach. In this business, fear was currency, and tonight, somebody was about to pay in full. Outside, thunder rolled down the avenue like a warning. The quiet kind that means trouble just found your address. By morning, the rain had stopped, but Brooklyn still looked wet with secrets. Paul walked the narrow alley behind his bar, cigarette low between his fingers, watching the steam rise off the pavement. This was his kingdom, not a throne and crown kind of power, but the kind built through whispers, favors, and the right people owing you just enough. He ran the numbers racket, the airport jobs, the stolen car rings. Nothing flashy. He let others brag, get photographed in silk suits. Paul preferred the small corner tables, where deals were written on napkins and forgotten before sunrise. That was how you lasted. The cops knew his name but not his face. The neighborhood called him Mr. V, a title that carried more weight than any badge. If someone needed work, he found it for them. If someone disappeared, he made sure the family got paid. He was feared, yes, but also needed. That balance kept the streets loyal. But in every web, there's a loose strand. Paul's youngest runner, Tommy, had been spending too much time at O'Hara's, talking, drinking, flashing bills. The kind of carelessness that smells like a leak. And in Paul's world, leaks didn't just get patched, they got buried. That evening, O'Hara's was loud with jukebox tunes and cheap whiskey breath. The kind of place where men talked too much when they felt invisible. Tommy sat in the corner booth, laughing with two girls who didn't belong there. His jacket hung open, pockets too light for the roll of cash he'd shown earlier. Then the door opened, and the laughter died a little. Paul Vario didn't need to announce himself. He just walked in, gray overcoat, dark tie, eyes that saw everything once and remembered it forever. He nodded to the bartender, who killed the music with one flick. Silence settled like dust. Paul slid into the booth across from Tommy. "You been busy," he said, voice low but clear. "You like attention, huh?" Tommy's grin faded. He stammered something about just celebrating, but Paul waved it off. "You celebrate when you earn something, not when you almost lose it." He tapped the table twice, slow, deliberate. The sound carried through the room. Two of Paul's men appeared near the exit, quiet as ghosts. Paul leaned in, eyes cold but not angry. "You don't get second chances in this line, kid. Only lessons." And that night, Tommy learned one he'd never forget. After Tommy disappeared from the streets, things went still again. Too still. That's how Paul liked it. Quiet meant control. The cops stopped poking around the airport, the papers lost interest, and his men worked like clockwork. No flash, no noise, just steady profit. Paul's reach began to stretch beyond Brooklyn. Cargo trucks in New Jersey, warehouses near Kennedy, and bars from Queens to Long Island, all paying their dues to Mr. V. He didn't have to show his face anymore. His name was the password that opened doors and closed mouths. He built a system, every man knew his lane, every cut calculated. If you owed Paul, you paid on time. If you worked for him, you kept your head down. He didn't yell or threaten, he just made people disappear from the story, like a page torn clean from a book. Still, there was one rule he broke himself: never trust family in business. His brother, Lenny, had a taste for easy money and loud nights. Paul kept him close, not out of love, but because he needed to know where the danger lived. And lately, that danger had been drinking too much and talking too loud. Lenny always said he wanted out of the game, but Paul knew better. Men like them didn't retire, they just ran out of luck. One night, Paul found him at a pool hall off Flatbush, laughing with a couple of small-time hustlers. Pockets full of cash that didn't belong to him. "Where'd you get it?" Paul asked quietly. Lenny shrugged, tried to play it cool. "Just a side thing, nothing big." But Paul could see the truth in his eyes. Lenny had been skimming from airport shipments, his own brother bleeding the operation dry. Paul dismissed the room with a gesture. The clatter of pool balls stopped. When the last man left, the silence hit hard. "You know what this means," Paul said. His voice wasn't angry, it was tired. Lenny lit a cigarette, hands trembling. "We're family, Paul." "Exactly," Paul said. "That's why I'm here, not someone else." He didn't raise his gun. Didn't need to. Just turned and walked out, leaving Lenny to stare at the door like it might save him. By morning, word spread that Lenny had vanished. Nobody asked questions. But from that day, Paul stopped trusting blood and started trusting fear. By the mid-70s, the city had changed. The streets were meaner, the cops hungrier, and Washington had its eyes on every boss from Brooklyn to the Bronx. The FBI was building files thicker than Bibles, and Paul's name showed up in more than a few. He'd been smart for years, no phones, no signatures, just whispers and handshakes. But the world was getting louder. His men were buying new cars, flashing money, talking too freely. Every success left a trail, and every trail led closer to him. When the feds raided one of his warehouses near Kennedy, they didn't find Paul, but they found his handwriting. Just a note with initials and numbers. It was enough to open a case. Paul sat in his bar that night, staring at the same wall he'd looked at for 20 years. He poured a drink, neat. "They think they're closing in," he said to no one. Henry Hill, one of his younger guys, sharp suit, quick smile, was sitting nearby, listening. Henry had ambition that glittered too much, the kind that drew eyes. Paul saw it, but he needed him. He didn't know it yet, but Henry Hill would be the last name he'd ever trust. Henry Hill was charming, funny, and reckless, the kind of man who could make you laugh while he stole your wallet. Paul liked him because he reminded him of the old days, loyalty mixed with hunger. But hunger turns to greed fast, and greed makes noise. Soon, Henry was moving drugs, cutting corners, and dragging Paul's clean operations into the mud. Paul had made one rule clear: no drugs. They drew too much heat, too many rats. But Henry didn't listen. He thought he was untouchable, living fast, talking faster. Then came the bust. Henry got picked up on a possession charge, and just like that, the silence around Paul began to crack. The feds wanted blood, and Henry was bleeding fear. Paul tried to keep calm. He told his men, "Stay quiet, stay home." But something in his gut told him the foundation was shifting. Every knock on the door, every engine starting outside, it all sounded like an ending coming closer. And one morning, as he sat by the window watching the streetlights fade, Paul finally said it out loud, "If Henry talks, we're all ghosts." And ghosts were the one thing Paul never wanted to become. It didn't happen in a gunfight or a raid. It happened quietly, just like he'd lived. Henry Hill started talking, names, dates, jobs, everything. The feds didn't even need to dig, Henry handed them the map. By the time Paul heard, the indictments were already typed, sealed, and waiting. They came for him at dawn. No drama. Just two agents and a pair of cold cuffs. Paul didn't resist. He looked almost relieved, like a man finally seeing the end of a long shift. The streets that once whispered his name now turned their backs. Loyalty dried up faster than blood on concrete. In court, he sat still while they read the charges: racketeering, extortion, conspiracy. The kind of words that sounded too official to belong to the same man who once fixed car doors and helped neighbors with rent. When the judge said 10 years, Paul nodded. No outburst, no plea. He just turned to his lawyer and said, "At least now I'll get some sleep." That night in his cell, staring at the cracked pane on the wall, Paul realized the truth. It wasn't the feds that got him. It was trust. And trust had always been his biggest mistake. Years passed, slow and heavy. Paul grew smaller behind bars, his once broad shoulders stooping, his hair thinning to silver. The younger inmates didn't know his name, didn't care that he once ruled half of Brooklyn without firing a shot. To them, he was just another old-timer who played cards and kept quiet. When he died in 1988, there were no headlines, no crowds. Just a short note in the paper: Paul Vario, reputed mobster, dies in prison at 73. That was it. The man who built an empire out of silence left the world the same way he lived, quietly, without ceremony. But in Brooklyn, there are still old bartenders who swear his presence lingers in the corners, his chair never pulled out, his glass never washed. They say he wasn't cruel, just cold, not evil, just cautious. Paul Vario's story isn't about fame or fortune. It's about how power built on fear will always collapse under trust, and how even the quietest men can cast the longest shadows. He never wanted statues or songs, only control. And in the end, control was the one thing even he couldn't keep. Don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gangster stories like this one. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Which gangster story should we explore next? Please reply to me in the comment section below.